Chapter 3. Trust yourself, not your doctor. The most impactful 13 days of my life were a direct result of defying a team of highly regarded doctors. My mother had just received a devastating diagnosis: pancreatic cancer. A team of specialists from Stanford and the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, institutions renowned for their medical prowess, swiftly recommended a barrage of interventions: biopsies, blood transfusions, and the placement of a liver stent. In most circumstances, a patient and their family, faced with such a dire prognosis and presented with a treatment plan from such prestigious institutions, would readily acquiesce. However, armed with my own medical knowledge and experience, I felt compelled to question the proposed course of action. My inquiries revealed a stark reality. These interventions offered, at best, a 1 in 3 chance of extending my mother's life by a mere few months. Equally likely was the possibility that these procedures would hasten her demise. The remaining probability offered no impact on her lifespan, yet would subject her to the isolation and potential complications of hospitalization. Compounding the situation, my mother's cancer had already begun to compromise her liver function and deplete her red blood cell count. This grim reality skewed the already bleak statistical probabilities further against her favor. The procedures, intended to help, risked exacerbating her already fragile state. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic was raging, imposing strict visitation restrictions that threatened to separate my mother from her family during her final days. The prospect of her enduring invasive procedures, potentially experiencing complications, and ultimately passing away alone in a sterile hospital room was unbearable. My mother, with remarkable clarity and courage, expressed her acceptance of her impending death. Her primary concern was to minimize pain and nausea during the time she had left. Despite her explicit wishes, the medical system relentlessly pushed for the very interventions she sought to avoid, even going so far as to subtly shame our family for questioning their aggressive approach. I recognized the inherent conflict of interest at play. While the doctor wasn't consciously advocating for suboptimal care, the invasive procedures would generate substantial revenue for the hospital. And physician compensation is often linked to such procedures. I pressed the oncologist, reiterating my understanding. You are recommending an invasive diagnostic procedure that offers no hope of significant life extension and carries the risk of my mother dying alone in a hospital, despite the virtual certainty of stage 4 pancreatic cancer based on existing blood tests and scans, compounded by liver failure and severe anemia? The doctor's affirmation, "Yes, that is what we're recommending," solidified my conviction that the proposed interventions served the system's interests rather than my mother's well-being. With the unwavering support of our family, my mother opted to forego the invasive procedure and spend her remaining days at home, surrounded by loved ones. The procedure, seemingly mandated by clinical algorithms and billing codes, offered no genuine benefit to her. This experience illuminated the vulnerability of patients navigating the complex medical landscape without an advocate equipped with the knowledge to challenge the system and prioritize patient-centered care. Instead of consigning my mother to a hospital room, potentially never to see her family again, we brought her home. The 13 days that followed were a testament to the power of human connection and the profound beauty of life's final chapter. On her last day of consciousness, my mother's strength waned, and her speech became labored. Yet, in a surge of energy, she expressed a poignant desire to visit her chosen final resting place, a serene natural burial ground nestled amidst a grove overlooking the ocean, just minutes from her home. We swiftly fulfilled her wish, transporting her to the tranquil setting. There, amidst the beauty of nature, my mother marveled at the ocean vista and the trees that would soon embrace her. We held each other close, sharing the unspoken language of love and grief. In a particularly touching moment, she beckoned my father to her side, cupping his face in her hands, and spoke of the magic they had shared throughout their lives. Their final embrace, a silent exchange of profound gratitude and love against the backdrop of the Pacific, became etched in my memory as the purest embodiment of life's meaning. "It's just so perfect and beautiful," she whispered, her gaze encompassing her family gathered around her. Shortly thereafter, she slipped into unconsciousness, passing away peacefully 2 days later, surrounded by her loved ones. These 13 days, imbued with love and connection, were the most precious of my life. Had we adhered to the medical system's recommendations, they would never have happened. The incentive to intervene, a deeper dive into the system's bias. During my medical training, a close friend specializing in surgical oncology shared a chilling observation. If you walk through the doors of this surgical oncology department, you are going to get an operation, whether you need it or not. This statement resonated deeply during my mother's experience. I recalled my friend's distress after witnessing patients coerced into unnecessary surgeries. Her frequent recommendations for palliative care, prioritizing comfort and peace for terminally ill patients, were often met with resistance, even hostility, from senior physicians whose identities and financial well-being were intertwined with surgical interventions. Patients declining surgery were often pressured to sign against medical advice (AMA) forms, potentially limiting access to palliative care or less invasive options. This exemplifies the inherent power imbalance in the doctor-patient relationship, where a patient's fear and vulnerability can be exploited to promote interventions that serve the system rather than the individual. It's crucial to understand that most doctors enter the medical profession with noble intentions. The arduous path of medical training, laden with financial burdens and personal sacrifices, is typically undertaken by individuals driven by a genuine desire to heal and alleviate suffering. The idealism and altruism that initially fuel their dedication are often eroded by the realities of a system driven by perverse incentives. The relentless pressure to generate revenue, coupled with the emotional toll of witnessing human suffering, contributes to the alarmingly high rates of burnout and suicide among physicians. They become trapped in a system that prioritizes interventions over prevention and profits from illness rather than health. Trust the system on acute issues, ignore it on chronic, a paradigm shift. Conventional medical advice often concludes with the caveat to consult your doctor. I offer a different perspective. When it comes to chronic disease, you should approach the medical system with a healthy dose of skepticism. This is not to dismiss the value of medical expertise in acute situations, but rather to recognize the systemic biases that undermine its effectiveness in addressing the chronic conditions that plague our society. My mother's experience exemplifies this disconnect. Despite receiving care from prestigious institutions, the focus remained on managing symptoms rather than addressing the underlying causes of her illness. The revolving door of specialist visits and prescriptions failed to prevent the progression of her disease. The aggressive interventions were reserved for the final, devastating stage, when little could be done to alter the course of her illness. The dramatic increase in life expectancy over the past century is largely attributed to advancements in sanitation, infectious disease control, emergency surgery, and antibiotics. These are triumphs in addressing acute conditions, problems that pose immediate life-threatening risks. However, the medical system has leveraged the trust earned through these successes to assert its authority on chronic diseases, where its track record is far less impressive. In fact, the rates of chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and mental health disorders are skyrocketing despite trillions of dollars spent on treatments that often fail to address the root causes. The current approach to chronic disease management is fragmented and reactive, treating symptoms rather than addressing the underlying metabolic dysfunction that often connects these seemingly disparate conditions. We are told to trust the science, yet the science clearly demonstrates the failure of the current system to stem the tide of chronic illness. The historical influence of figures like Dr. William Stewart Halsted, who championed an intervention-focused model of medical education, and John D. Rockefeller, whose financial backing shaped the medical curriculum to prioritize pharmaceuticals, continues to exert its influence on the system today. Bias for action, unmasking conflicts of interest. The pervasive influence of pharmaceutical companies and the emphasis on interventions create a system riddled with conflicts of interest. From influential panels shaping national pain management guidelines to the funding of medical research and the financial ties between pharmaceutical companies and leading medical institutions, the bias towards intervention is deeply entrenched. The very metrics used to evaluate physician performance, such as relative value units, RVUs, incentivize procedures and prescriptions over preventative care and lifestyle interventions. This bias towards action permeates medical training. Doctors are rewarded for doing something, even if that something is ultimately ineffective or even harmful. The focus on billing codes and RVUs reinforces a system that prioritizes profit over patient well-being. The prevailing mentality is to fight disease, often after it has taken hold, rather than to address the underlying factors that contribute to its development. This "fuck cancer" mentality, while seemingly motivational, ignores the preventable nature of many cancers and the importance of early intervention focused on lifestyle changes. The biggest lie in healthcare, the myth of complexity. Perhaps the most insidious consequence of the current system is the perpetuation of the myth that the causes of chronic disease are complex and beyond our control. This lie serves the interests of both the food industry, which profits from selling highly processed, addictive foods, and the healthcare industry, which profits from treating the diseases these foods cause. Medical leaders remain conspicuously silent on the primary drivers of our health crisis: diet and lifestyle. They fail to address the alarming rates of childhood obesity, the pervasive marketing of unhealthy foods to children, the impact of sedentary lifestyles, and the widespread exposure to environmental toxins. They also fail to challenge the influence of the food industry on nutritional guidelines and the funding of medical organizations. This silence is not simply a matter of oversight, it is a direct result of the financial incentives that perpetuate the status quo. Saving yourself, empowering patients to take control. Despite the daunting challenges posed by the current system, there is reason for optimism. The advancements in sanitation, infectious disease control, and emergency medicine demonstrate the capacity for progress. The key is to shift the focus from treating symptoms to addressing root causes. This requires a paradigm shift in both the medical system and individual behavior. Patients must become empowered to take control of their own health. This means questioning conventional wisdom, seeking out information from credible sources, and adopting a proactive approach to lifestyle choices. The good energy principles outlined in this book provide a framework for making informed decisions about diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, and environmental exposures. By embracing these principles, individuals can take concrete steps to improve their metabolic health and reduce their risk of chronic disease, This is not about rejecting medical expertise altogether. Doctors play a vital role in managing acute conditions and providing specialized care. However, when it comes to chronic disease, patients must become active participants in their own health journey, challenging the status quo and demanding a system that prioritizes prevention and well-being over profit and intervention. The revolution in healthcare will not come from the top down. It will come from empowered patients demanding better.